are these people?
Okay. So I have a lot to say about this. So that's why I left this.
Look, you can leave us chats on Twitter now too, so you can get in the chat there.
Yeah,
we'll
cool.
see it. You know,
cool.
Pitchforks are coming, said I posted. Maybe more will join. I hope so. You know?
Yes. But anyway, I don't particularly enjoy doing this story, but after the last couple of days, this infuriated me to no end for reasons that I will explain later in this. And in regards to the story, as I said earlier, there's an update regarding some information that some people and online and other independent channels were saying shit about the people who went to protest Biden in regards to genocide. I'll share more about those thoughts later as well. But I'm sure a lot of you already know the story by now because I know other people in the space have covered it. So we're just going to get into it. But those, all of you know, or most of you probably know by now, Biden went to Mother Emmanuel AME Church on Monday, basically to give campaign speech.
Yep.
Again, we've said this many times. Separation of church and state is a thing. He should not have done it in the church. But even with that, as a quick aside, it's just amazing how many people do it, even on the local level, that, you know, no accountability with that. But
yeah,
I digress. But this church was well known because they were victims of a mass shooting back in 2015 where white supremacist Dylan Roof went into the church and shot up and killed 9 parishioners there. So that's why it has become known in the news. But there's also some historical reference to this church as well. And actually, I want to play this because it will kind of give more of a basis and I think more of a reason as to what happened on Monday was valid on the part of people who were expressing their grievances to Joe Biden, and how nothing was done. And surprisingly, this actually comes from CNN. So, very short clip. It's about 2 minutes. So we'll play that, and then we'll continue.
Located less than a mile from Charleston's historic slave market and established in 1816, deep in the slavery years, Emmanuel has always been more than a place of worship. As the oldest African Methodist Episcopal church in the South, it is a living testament to the trials of Black America. Here, one of the church founders tried to organize a slave rebellion almost 200 years ago, only to see the church burned to the ground when it was discovered. More than 300 alleged plotters were arrested, 35 were executed. Here, runaway slaves were secretly helped on their perilous journey north. Here, Martin Luther King Jr. invited new generations to march for equality, even as white supremacists were still hoisting their own crosses. Through it all, Emmanuel has been a leading force for AME churches and outspoken leaders.
People like Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman and Rosa Parks belong to it. And the AMA Church is always about human rights and civil rights.
The Black Church has always been our freedom house.
Alton Pollard is dean at the Howard University School of Divinity, and he says Emmanuel led the way for so many Black churches by being a place where African American politicians, leaders, organizers, teachers, and more could find acceptance when they were barred from so much of America.
You know that you will come there unfiltered. You will come there without recrimination made against you. So no matter the disparages of the larger social order, you come here and you can learn how to be as fully human as you are.
That's what Emmanuel meant.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And part of that means the affirming of every single person who comes inside our doors and those who are within the communities around us.
Well, it's funny how the pastor mentioned that is a place where voices were affirmed, but not in this case of Monday. Like they cucked out basically. So just to give you some history, like this church in particular was built on protests and resistance, as especially given the civil rights movement. So fast forward to Monday, Biden goes in there and tries to appeal to the Black boomer base. And we know what happens, but I take delight in watching this happen.
Almost a Boondocks episode, pretty much.
Right.
Pretty much.
So let's play it.
Without the truth, there's no light. Without light, there's no path from this darkness.
If you really care about the lives lost here, then you should honor the lives lost and call for a ceasefire in Palestine. Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now!
That's all right. That's all right. That's all right. That's all right.
He has no idea what's happening right now. No clue what's happening. I'm surprised he's able to be in a church without bursting into flames anyway. So,
Well, this church is desecrated anyway. So
I know.
Look,
Right?
folks, I understand.
He had to ask permission first before being let in.
I understand
across
the
the threshold.
And I've been quietly working with the Israeli government to get them to reduce and
That's the issue.
get out of Gaza.
That's the issue. You've been working with the Israeli government. That's the issue.
But I understand the passion. Look, folks, after the civil... Thank you. Well, thank
Shut up. Shut up. How much were you paid for that?
Look, after the Civil
Someone got
War,
herself a new lace front tomorrow,
defeated
is what happened.
Confederates couldn't accept the verdict of the war. They had
Got her
lost.
nails did and everything.
So they say they embraced what's known as the lost cause, a self-serving lie that the Civil War is not about slavery, but about states' rights. They've called that the noble cause. That was
you can
a
actually
lie.
stop here. We're good.
Yeah, like he's off on a fucking
We're good. So
tangent.
yeah, so we get the point. But oh God, I have a lot to say.
Oh, God, say that shit.
Where should I begin? Okay. It pains me. Biden being there, stumping, giving a campaign speech aside. Going back to the first segment, this is why Biden believes, and the administration believes, that the issue of Israel and Palestine is not going to mean anything in the end. Because, unfortunately, in this case of my own people, of the older generation, who went through the civil rights movement, who should know better, that should be talking to us right now of how to resist, who had the opportunity to hear MLK, Malcolm X, all our figures face to face, and to forget all of that the moment that they were integrated, I'm mad. More than mad.
Yeah. Well, it feels like they're being
Because
used. That's what it seems like to me.
no, it's
You know?
not that they're being used. They're comfortable. That's the
Mhm.
problem. They're fucking comfortable. They got what they need. They have everything that they need. And they're like, fuck you, younger generation. Oh, no, actually, not fuck you. Like, you guys complain too much. Like, you complain about, oh, you don't have housing, or oh, you can't pay your
Right.
bills.
The
and all
world's
that.
on fire.
Like, oh, we're good. We're
Right.
eating good.
Yeah.
And we're close to death. So we got everything we need right now.
Shit, our buddy
Meanwhile,
Clyburn had
the
a
rest
fish
of us
fry
are
with us
struggling.
last week. You know? Like,
And I hate saying it because this is my community. But the fact that even among our elders in our community, that and shout out to my dad. My dad is not this generation. My dad is as old as Biden, so he's silent generation. But he
Right.
tells me all the time. Every time I speak to him, it's like, what is wrong with our people? What is wrong with us? Like, and my dad's still fighting at 83. But even he is saying, like, I am tired. Like, he considers us lost. And given this, what happened here, I could see why my dad and people like him are just fed up. Because
Yep.
of people like this who are not encouraging us, younger generations, to do what these guys were doing many years ago.
Yes.
We should be coming to them.
Well, we're going to get to it in a bit.
No. They actually should be protesting in the church.
Yes. That's like where it should be. That's where it started. Was like that kind of protest, which that's the thing, was like we were going to get to it, but like a lot of this pushback of this was that, you know, white people coming into a black church, yada yada. Meanwhile, Amy Schumer can post Martin Luther King to defend her shit. No one says shit. Like, you know, it's just frustrating. And for them to go 4 more years is such a fucking, it's almost like they had cue cards ready.
Right.
So
anyway, this will be kind of fun. So this is a Common Dreams article. Shout out to them. This is written by, this is going to be an article of tweets. So this is what's going to make it fun. I'm just going to pull tweets for this article essentially, but Jessica Corbett pulled out most of them. I'll add in a few extra. But she writes, Biden backers chant 4 more years as protesters demand Gaza ceasefire. Biden, every American politician who continues to support arming Israel as it kills more and more Palestinians in Gaza every day, do not deserve a moment of peace in their public lives, said one critic. Can you pull back up from Gorman Monarch?
Yep.
So you're right. The church is meant to be separate from state. Having politics and an establishment-fed government employee, aka Biden, being inside the church is total dystopia. Exactly. Like, he should not have been there. He wasn't giving a sermon. He was rallying. That's what it was. And we talked about that before with Pastor Warnock doing similar shit last year. So, anyway, yeah, as I said, so many churches do this, like, all the time, and it's not called out. And I just have a huge issue with it. But especially within the Black community, this is almost like, rampant, like, disrespect, and then just ultimately, like, separation church and state. But anyway,
I love that dude's hand
Yeah.
signals, like he's parting the Red Sea, just like it's like.
So shout it, if not now.
Yeah.
They tweet, breaking, activists in South Carolina just took over Biden's speech to call for a ceasefire. 20,000 dead Palestinians, their blood is on your hands. Biden was shaken. He's starting to understand the reality. His war on Gaza is horrifically unpopular and people are fed up. Noting that the disruption in South Carolina came after New York City demonstrators on Monday morning shut down the Holland and 3 major Manhattan bridges,
Yep.
if not now added, young people are furious. We will not allow Biden and the U.S. to continue to support the starvation and slaughter of Gaza.
Come on, man.
So at Naffy Baby is Back writes, hell yeah. Biden and every American politician who continues to support arming Israel as it kills more and more Palestinians in Gaza every day do not deserve a moment of peace in their public life. Ceasefire now.
Yep.
Some Biden backers criticized the protesters for targeting the president on hallowed ground, provoking responses that highlighted recent actions by Israeli forces in Gaza, from killing thousands of kids to bombing places of worship, as well as the history of this church, which was co-founded by Denmark Vesely, who was executed for planning a slave revolt. So, case in point, Miss Simone Sanders herself tweeted on Monday, Mother Emmanuel AME is hallowed ground in the AME Church community and in Charlestown especially. The shock of people in the crowd at protesters yelling out while President Biden was speaking from the pulpit cannot be understated. I too couldn't believe it. Pearls clutching. Pearls clutching. Oh my God.
Oh God.
Protesting.
Nobody cares.
Oh. Like.
So B.A. Parker responded to this. To dilute the history of Black churches as if they weren't the epicenter of civil rights organizing is more than a little harmful. It's downright disingenuous. And if young folk are protesting in a church as a call to action, then maybe they should be heard instead of collected.
Uh-huh.
Margaret Kimberly writes, the church is hallowed ground and a war criminal shouldn't be allowed in the pulpit. If Biden wants to go to church, he can sit in the pews, pray silently, and ask for forgiveness for his acts in genocide. This church should pray about letting themselves be used by criminal Biden.
They were trying to get their tax exemption still. They were working on that. Don't worry about it.
Right.
You know?
Nick from Revolutionary Blackout writes, the Black church continues to sell its people out to the genocidal pro-police Democratic Party. Fuck you and anyone using Black people to shield the genocide.
Yep.
At Charlene Cack writes, I am ashamed that we would allow a president who is actively funding a genocide to speak on such hallowed ground and that more people didn't join the call to stop killing Palestinians. Our ancestors had so much taken from them. They deserve better from us.
Yeah, it's don't get uppity. That's all the crap was detractors from this. You know?
Right. At Lord Leda writes, both Martin and Malcolm would say otherwise.
Yes, they would.
Revolutions were born in Black churches, and the Palestinian struggle is deeply interlinked with ours. Church is the exact place to protest.
Not that Martin doesn't have his issues with the Israelis, but Malcolm had it right.
And yours truly, actually, this tweet blew up
pretty well.
So a lot of you resonated with that. Thank you. So I wrote, Black boomers truly are a detriment to movements nowadays. Cheering for Biden like lapdogs when he has done nothing for Black people.
Yep.
As of Monday, Israeli bombings and raids in Gaza killed over 23,000 Palestinians and injured nearly 15,000 more. A growing number of legal scholars and world leaders have accused Israel of genocide, including at the International Court of Justice. And actually, I think trial starts tomorrow, I believe, for that. The Democrats rushing to Biden's defense should realize that chanting 4 more years in response to a protest objecting to the U.S. government's support of the genocide in Gaza is not doing anything to improve the president's standing as his own polls continue to drop. said in these times senior editor Miles Kamprad-Lawson. The New York Times reported Monday, voters broadly disapprove of Mr. Biden's handling of the war, and it's become a major political for him. The protest on Monday, though brief, was a stark reminder that Mr. Biden will not be able to escape the subject as he seeks re-election. Protesters calling for a ceasefire interrupted at least 2 of his speeches late last year, one in Minnesota and one in Illinois. More than 500 appointees and employees in the federal government signed a letter calling for a ceasefire in November. Staff members held a vigil outside the White House in December, and 2 officials have resigned in protest of his policies on Israel and Gaza, which we talked about earlier.
Yep.
Political commentator
Waleed
Shadid, also writes, I imagine there will be even larger protests like this at Biden's campaign events in swing states like Michigan and Georgia. I
can't wait.
Hope so. I fucking hope so.
Yeah.
Especially if he's near Dearborn. I hope.
Yep.
Arab community unite. Powers unite. Let's go.
Right.
Right to jail, right away.
Youssef Munayir writes, probably going to be the norm for every public event on the campaign.
God, I hope.
Biden is under mounting pressure, not only from the public, but also from progressives in Congress, with Representative Ro Khanna warning in a Friday interview with Common Dreams that calling for a ceasefire in Gaza is going to be a dividing issue for the Democratic Party for the future, like the Iraq War was. And I think the window is rapidly closing to be on the right side of history.
Probably already gone.
Probably, yeah. Referring to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the Center for International Policy's Matt Dutz told MSNBC's Chris Hayes that Biden has essentially outsourced decision-making for an extremely consequential war to one of the most dangerous right-wing authoritarian leaders in the world, and I do use that term advisedly. The outrage at President Biden's handling of this war and his continuing unconditional support for this massacre that we've been seeing over the past 3 months is really off the charts, Duffs added, warning that the issue can impact the November presidential election.
Yep.
So I want to play this. Go back. Sorry.
Yep.
So I do want to play this. So this is Bree Newsom Bass. You probably have seen her being very vocal about this on Twitter, and I've enjoyed. She can get it wrong sometimes, but for the most part, she's spot on. So kind of to give you some background on her, she was the person after this massacre at this church in reference to the Confederate flag outside the State House. She climbed out the pole and took it down. So that's her claim to fame regarding that. And since then, and I think more recently, she's been very openly critical of Biden, especially given his ineffectiveness within the Black community and as well on Israel and Gaza. So I believe she went on Democracy Now! With Amy yesterday. At least this was premiered on yesterday.
Gotcha.
So we're going to hear her and her take on all of this bullshit. So you can go ahead.
Following the massacre at the Emmanuel AME Church in 2015, following the mass funeral at the University of Charleston Arena that thousands came out for, our next guest, Bree Newsom Bass, scaled the 30-foot flagpole at the South Carolina State Capitol and removed the Confederate flag. As police officers shouted at her to come down, she shimmied to the top of the flagpole, took the flag in her hand and said, "You come against me with hatred, I come against you in the name of God. This flag comes down today."
You come against me with hatred and oppression and violence. I come against you in the name of God. This flag comes down today.
While Bree Newsom was arrested, along with an ally, it was only after this action that the Confederate flag was formally removed from the South Carolina State House grounds. Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley was governor of South Carolina at the time. She has faced fresh backlash after she didn't mention slavery when asked about the cause of the U.S. Civil War during a recent town hall in New Hampshire. Well, for more, we're joined in Raleigh, North Carolina by Bree Newsome Bass, artist, anti-racist activist. Bree, welcome back to Democracy Now! This certainly does take us back. As people debate whether it was Nikki Haley who ultimately forced the flag to come down, we're going to the woman who actually took it down and risked your freedom to do it. Talk about why you did that then. Ultimately, the legislature would vote to take it down, and how you feel about what's happening today.
Yes, and thank you again so much for having me on. You know, I want to make it clear, yes, I did scale the pole and take the Confederate flag down. This was an issue that people had been protesting for years and years and years. And that's part of what made it so egregious in 2015 when we had the massacre at Emmanuel AME, and South Carolina refused to lower the flag, because part of the reason why they were refusing to lower the flag is that they had passed a law in the year 2000 saying that it couldn't be lowered for any reason after they moved it from the Capitol Dome to the flagpole on the lawn where it was at the time that I took it down. So this had been going on for years and years and years. And Nikki Haley actually opposed taking the flag down right up until those massacres occurred, and the mounting political protest and the pressure made it where she basically had to, at that point, support the flag coming down. So ideologically, she has never really had this stance of being opposed to either the Confederacy or, excuse me, symbols of the Confederacy, and certainly not opposed to racist policy. She went right from the governorship to serving in the Trump administration. And she's had a number of incidents over the years where the things that she says or the things that she does directly contradict with her, her claim of having led the way on taking the Confederate flag down. At one of her recent rallies, she played that song, Find Out in a Small Town, the song that people really raised a lot of concern about because it was obviously alluding to sundown towns and the racial violence that Black people have experienced here for decades and decades and decades. So this is not new for Nikki Haley. It just shows that she does not really represent anti-racism in any real way.
And Bree, I'd like to ask you, in response to President Biden's speech, you posted on social media, quote, how the Black church is used as a prop for white politicians actually proves the point that racism is alive and well and strong. Could you expand on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I think that the whole way that the incidents in 2015, both the massacre at Emmanuel AME, the refocus on the Confederate flag there in South Carolina, the formal ceremony around taking the flag down, and the way that American politics returns to those moments again and again and again speaks to how relevant it still is. The fact that Black churches are frequently used as, political campaign stops for politicians. In this case with Joe Biden, he is clearly trying to make an appeal, not just to Black voters, but really trying to fend off criticism that he is racist, that he is sponsoring a genocide. And that criticism is completely well-founded because he is sponsoring a genocide. And genocide is the most extreme form of racial violence that there is. And so to use the pulpit at Emmanuel AME in this manner to make it a prop essentially for Joe Biden's re-election bid, to me, is the greatest assault on truth. I know Joe Biden stood there in the pulpit and said that there is an assault on truth that's happening right now. Joe Biden is in many ways leading that assault. And I know that he's running against Donald Trump, who we know is also a serial liar, but Donald Trump is not the one who is currently in office right now. It is Joe Biden. And this effort to use the church, not just the Black church, but the site of racial violence, of a mass murder, to deflect from the fact that Joe Biden himself is bombing churches, bombing mosques, bombing places of worship, and murdering many civilians, people who have sought shelter in those places. It just exposes the complete hypocrisy of this entire situation and the vacuum of moral leadership at the top. And that's why I took offense to it. I think that's why many people who watched it took offense to it. I'm very glad that the young people stood up and protested, because even though they were few in that audience, they represented the majority of people worldwide.
Well, it sounds like, Collin, people didn't play her the record player enough as a child. That's what that sounds like.
What do you mean?
Do you remember that? That was Biden on a debate stage, bro.
Oh God.
Where like he said
God.
the reason black people are bad is because their parents didn't play them enough record players. Like, pretty much. I mean, I'm paraphrasing,
no,
but
Nikki Haley aside, and actually it may be worth watching the whole clip. It's about 13 minutes long. She goes into, following this, she goes into the Nikki Haley thing. But
sure.
But I think in light of this, in terms of what happened at this church, I agree. And it's funny, the only reason that Biden at the time, when Obama was president, the only reason why this church was on his purview at all was because of the shooting, right?
Yes. Yep.
So, and what in the fuck have they done since then to rectify that?
Nothing.
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 So, Biden had no. So, George Floyd bill, as far as shit, that hasn't gone past. Nothing in regards to police accountability, that hasn't gone past. We still have no $15 minimum wage. I don't know how low it is in South Carolina, their state minimum wage, but I'm sure it's low.
Yeah. Best you get is kente cloth, kneeling,
and a fish
Congress
fry.
people.
And
yes.
And some shitty fish.
Yeah.
From Jen Klein.
Nothing! Absolutely nothing!
So, and I have to go off on our community a little bit more in terms of, because on Monday, as I was listening and getting all this information, I was hearing a few people in the FAB and the ADOS community, and they definitely had plenty to say regarding how the Black Prime Ministers basically did not bring Biden to task. But they were also making the complaint that the white people had no right being in there and calling for a protest. Like, and I'm just kind of like, okay,
yeah,
but you can't have two things at the same time. Like, like, granted, like, your complaint, and from what you saw, there was one Black girl at least there. And we're going to get into that. It's not indicative of what the whole scene, and I'll share more of that later. But it was just really infuriating to hear, like, Black people basically cutting down these activists, protesters, for being like, oh, you only did that because you care about Israel and Gaza or whatever. Like, when it comes to reparations or anything regarding Black issues, white people don't stand up for us. And while that might be true, again, where's the Black people making that charge to Biden right then and there when they had the opportunity to? And you can easily make the connection of how, and I'll get more into that later, in terms of how our funding in Israel is affecting Black people here. The Black people could have done that in that church, and they didn't. And that's the part that is really frustrating to me out of all of that. Have anything you want to say to this or whatever? No. Okay. So, someone who responded to my tweet that I mentioned earlier, and I think this kind of summarizes this whole thing and why I have problems with the Black church in general. So at the Mr. AC said, agreed. I think the problem is how Black political organization has always historically been structured. Local leaders, ministers, churches, and community organizers are connected through regional Democratic Party machinery all the way to the federal level and take their marching orders from the top down. Local communities trust their leaders no matter how corrupt and plugged into a self-interest system they were. Whereas young African Americans get their news, information, and solidarity like all other people, young people, online. Case in point, Jim Clyburn. Like, all he had to do back in the last election was tell Black people, vote for Biden, and a lot of these are church folk, they listened and voted for Biden. So same shit here, although I'm sure now it might be a little shaky, but at least in this community, he's going to still kind of mention, oh, I'll give you your fish fry, but vote for Biden. And many of those people will. So, but this has been my issue with the Black church just generally in terms of, and I mentioned this to you like a couple of nights ago, that my feeling is generally the Black church is nominal, I would argue, in terms of dealing with local issues, maybe state issues, but they're kind of shit when it comes to foreign issues. And I'll give you an example. Like, growing up in the church, like my last churches that I went to after college up until really honestly 2 years ago, I was involved in a church movement that did missions. So I've talked about going to Uganda and how I ended up living there for a few months doing working on a children's ministry program. That's how I got connected to that through the church that I was going to at the time. And one thing that I noticed now, my church was predominantly white. And when I would go to a lot of these, so I had the opportunity to go to Morocco, Jordan, and Uganda through mission trips that my church did at the time when I was there. The majority of, not majority, every missionary that I saw that was on the field in these foreign countries. And then when I went to Uganda, you know, obviously every missionary there was white. The fact that me being a Black person who was doing a longer term stint, more than 2 weeks, was very, what's the word? It was rare, like in the sense of come and visit them than they were to have someone like me come in to visit them. Like, it confused the fuck out of them. Like, they were trying to place me in terms of, but it makes sense because the mission field is dominated by white people, which I think in many ways can be problematic, especially in the global South, where they might be the minority and they're bringing in, unfortunately, some of these white supremacist things, even though they may not know it, but they're kind of bringing that stuff in terms of their religion. And I remember even back then, it bothered me that there weren't many missionaries of color on the mission field at the time. But I say all of that because it relates to this, that if my personal belief, if Black people were more involved just generally in terms of international politics, especially within the church, we wouldn't have this reaction, I would imagine, than what these Black practitioners did here. So it just shows, unfortunately, how within the Black community, well, with the older Black community, I would say, not necessarily the youth, how isolationist they are. And I think that kind of resonates somewhat within the ABA, ADOS movements, tends to be very much about African American versus thinking in terms outside of this country. And I think especially in countries in the global south. So I agree with this tweet. I relate to this tweet, and I've seen it. And I think that I think that's my biggest issue in terms of the Black church in general. Anything else you want to say before I move on? I think you're on mute, Reef. Okay, so Reef's sound broke. Kind of usual for Reef that something breaks on him on his end. So I'm just going to keep going while you fix it. Is that okay? All right. So, all right. So actually, while we do that, as I said, we have an update to all of this. So literally, as I was finishing up this stream, this segment last night, this popped up on my Twitter. You'll have to move that screen if I can't see. Sorry. Thank you. So this tweet is from @Raleigh Cox, who wrote, "The organizers that disrupted President Biden's speech at Mother Emmanuel AME Church, Reef, in Charleston to demand a ceasefire on Gaza have released a statement with demands, amplifying the statement." Okay, so there's some important information here that I think is important. So, January 8th, 1 p.m., Charleston. 6 members of Free Palestine Charleston on January 8th participated in the disruption to call for a ceasefire in Gaza during President Joe Biden's speech at Mother Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston. A crowd of over 100 people simultaneously gathered at a permitted event in Marion Square to show support for Palestine. So, for what I gathered today, is that so from what we saw, there was about maybe 6 people there in the congregation. What happened was, according to reports that I was seeing on Twitter, the security, and to believe that there would actually be security at a church, did not allow most of the protesters in. And what we got there was the few that were able to make it in. So there was supposed to be a lot more, but the church prevented them from getting in.
Okay. So it wasn't just some white folk.
No. So I don't want to assume that. So
about 100
as
people
I said,
that weren't let in.
There were about that many who weren't allowed in, and those few did.
Gotcha.
So there would have been a lot more raucous if most of them were able to get it. So that's why it seemed fairly light. So that's the first thing. So the church did not permit them in. Number 2. Biden's refusal to call for a ceasefire, ongoing arms transfers to Israel without Congress approval, and failure to acknowledge that Israel's actions constitute genocide as outlined in the UN Genocide Convention, a treaty that the United States is a signatory to, demonstrate that he's more than complicit in genocide. He is an active participant. Free Palestine CSH, that's the organization that organized this, by the way, recognizes the delicate nature of this action given the Mother Emmanuel AME massacre less than a decade prior and the sanctity of the church itself to many members of the community. The nonviolent demonstration was planned by local Black and Palestinian leaders in consultation with members of the AME community to respect the church's history. So to all the Black people who are going off online, basically, why are these white people coming in and desecrating our church and all this bullshit? This was planned by local Black and Palestinian leaders with permission from the church community. All right?
Like, yep.
We get that.
The numbers don't lie, and they spell disaster for you.
Oh, but it's better.
Okay.
They keep going. So, we decided the best way to honor the church's mass shooting victims and its long history as a site for civil disobedience would be to wait until President Joe Biden began his speech to disrupt, rather than retracting from any of the church's esteemed Black elders or devaluing a place of worship. So, a lot, again, what I heard on Twitter, they went after and talked down the Black people who were there. Did you see that, Reef?
Yeah. Yes. You want to?
Well, did you see the protesters talk down any of the Black congregation? No. The elders there. They went after Biden.
Yes.
And they had the fucking right to.
And then those leaders turned right back around and slapped him in the face. Like,
But to be clear, this was not a church service. It was a political campaign event. Several Black congregants associated with Free Palestine CHS were also singled out and denied entry to the event, including lead Charlestown Black Lives Matter organizer Marcus
McDonald.
Yeah. Yep. We find it so disrespectful that President Biden has come to the place of a massacre while actively benefiting and promoting a genocide and a massacre in Gaza, McDonald said. My church missed the mark. It missed the call of Jesus to choose the oppressed, the orphan, the widow, and the refugee over the empire. President Biden has no place speaking from our pulpit to invoke the lives lost at Emmanuel, while simultaneously ignoring the thousands of lives lost in Gaza, the bombing of Bethlehem, and the apartheid in the Holy Land. I stand with the heritage to protest that birthed the AME Church to issue the only righteous call to study war no more. We are not free until Palestine is free, said Pastor Darian Jones of Monk's Corner AME.
This is the guy who wrote the crime bill.
As residents and community members of Charleston, we know that all struggles for liberation are intertwined. Atrocities committed against Black folks in the U.S. and Palestinians in Gaza have always belonged to the same system of violence. Visit Samuel L. Green spoke of Malcolm X and James Baldwin as two righteous leaders in his introductory remarks. Both famously strongly supported Palestine for their entire lives and careers as civil rights activists. So, as one of our members said, to begin the disruption, if you really care about the lives lost here, then you should honor the lives lost and call for a ceasefire in Palestine. We must pressure our elected officials at the local, state, and federal levels. But our work doesn't begin or end with a ceasefire. We believe liberation means freedom and justice for all living in occupied Palestine. We believe in humanity and joy, not only to an end to this horrific genocide, but a world in which Palestinians can grow alongside their friends and family. We acknowledge the absurdity of having to even make this ask. Our demands consist of the following. 1. An end to the deadly exchange, the transfer and manufacturing of weapons among the Israeli government, the United States government, and oppressive government regimes throughout the world. Among the exchange 2022 program participants was Deputy Chief Dustin Thompson, Operations Bureau Commander, Charleston Police Department Charleston ex-Chief of Police, the late Luther Reynolds, participated in 2018, and former Sheriff Al Cannon attended a similar summit in Israel in 2009. His trip cost $3,000 and was financed via these drug funds, the U.S. Post and Courier wrote. Did you say something, Reef?
Seize drug funds is what I said.
Right. But money used to go to Israel.
Yes. Yep. That he took from street entrepreneurs, street pharmaceutical reps, you know, the seized drug money, like, you know, taken directly from the people's community. Like, okay.
Number 2, an end to the normalization of Zionism against Palestinians in every aspect of our lives, including but not limited to media narratives, institutional support, and government backing. Zionism is a political ideology rooted in white supremacy and Western imperialism that promotes the belief in the establishment of a Jewish state on historic Palestinian land. Evangelical Zionism funds the majority of contributions to Israel and is one of the most powerful lobbies in politics. 3, accountability for elected officials who actively support and even praise Israel's war crimes. Our state treasurer recently signed a bond allotting $30 million of our tax dollars to further Israel's mass murder of Palestinian men, women, and children. We do not want our tax dollars supporting genocide. So even on, well, you have to go up. So even on the state level, there's this bullshit.
Yes.
Number 4, and this will be the most important for all you black fake ass like activists who are calling out these white people for Israel and making the charge that they don't care about our issues. Number 4, an end to EBIT systems, a facility manufacturing weapons the IOF currently uses to commit its crimes against humanity, operating in Lansing, South Carolina. EBIT Systems invested $35 million in the relocation and recently opened its 135,000 square foot plant in Lansing. It receives tax cuts for its investment. A 2019 fiscal year reported disclosed that companies' extra revenue diverted $143 million from public schools across the state, disproportionately low-income schools with mostly black and brown students.
$423 million.
Which means this company in South Carolina divested from public schools to fund Israel. So again, black people who say we shouldn't care about Israel, this is why we should care. Because, and again, this is the call that I could have made to these black elders. You didn't necessarily have to call out Biden, for Israel-Palestine. You didn't have to necessarily do that. But you can take your pick on any black issue.
Anything else.
Anyone. You can make the call for reparations. You can make the call for universal health care. You can make the call for fixing our public schools. You can make the call for better jobs. You can make the call for higher wages. Take your pick.
Yep.
But the idea that you're sitting there shouting 4 more years and being like, oh, Joe Biden, you're such a nice man. Thank you for coming to my church for a damn photo op when he only came once.
Yeah.
Once. And the only time he came once to your church was due to the white supremacists that shut up your congregation, and he has not come no other time other than today, strictly to make the appearance that he cares when he hasn't done anything policy-wise to make your lives and my life and the people who I care about's lives better, and especially what's going on abroad. Number 5, a free Palestine, always and forever. And I will continue saying that until I'm blue in the face. And I keep saying this. We need to be more concerned because any money that is going overseas to fund all these wars and all this bullshit can easily go to fund our shit here. And people need to fucking realize that. And so all those people on Twitter who are yelling at cussing me out and saying, oh, Biden's doing the best that he can. He's gotten some shit done. Like, tell me what in the fuck he's gotten done tangibly to make our lives improve. The hood is still the hood. Our schools are still fucked up. And you're all talking about like, oh, these white people have no right to make this call to Gaza. They don't care about black people's rights and our issues. In this case, they did.
Mm-hmm.
And they did exactly the right thing that they were supposed to do. And I want to shout them out. It seems like they actually spoke to black people and Palestinian people, and that's how they were able to make it. And that's the true meaning of solidarity. So that's why we need to do exactly what this is exactly the thing that we should be doing.
Yep.
And just as a shout out to them, we actually contacted them. We're hoping to have some of these organizations, these organizers on the show at some point, hopefully within the next few days. So we will let you know on Twitter once we confirm that. But I do have a lot more questions besides of what I said here. So, but again, so to all those motherfuckers who are being like, oh, like it's just as you, shut the fuck up, pay attention, and actually do you more research before you start spouting bullshit online when it's not even factual or it may not be fully correct.
Yep.
That's my rant for tonight. Anything else you want to say before we move on?
No, I think you said everything I needed to say. So, but you know, I'm sure some people have some thoughts. So leave them down there in the comment section. You know how this goes. Share the stream, like and subscribe if you haven't done that already. We're trying to get to 2K subscribers. So we're almost there. We're getting there. So, but yeah, let me check the Rockfin and Rumbles before we get to our next one. Animators tipped, I think that's $3. Let me zoom so I can actually read stuff. It's $5. Look, Collin, sorry if I missed your comment on this. How do we break the silence of black churches on foreign affairs? I went to Bellowait College and attended several in all. I got in response to helping end war was we have our own war here in this country first. That's her comment.
If I had the answer to that, I'd be a rich man, to be quite honest with you. I think, honestly, if you were, and who is the person? What's the person's name?
Animators.
Yeah, thank you so much for your tip. Honestly, I think, unfortunately, any work that you have to do will have to be outside the black church. I'm sorry. So that could be like if you do stuff on your own, or if you find an organization outside the church that you're willing to partner with that's doing the work that you support and able to collaborate with them, then I say do that if you really feel called to do that. But I think at this point, honestly, until the black church needs a renaissance, really, in terms of their mission and like their actual really pushing for progress in terms of what they used to do in the civil rights movement and even prior to that. Like, they've really lost their way in terms of how the Democratic Party has basically infiltrated those systems. And look at someone like Jim Clyburn. He's able to make one phone call to all his churches within the state, and basically he has them in line in terms of who to vote for, what they're supposed to do. So that's the system that we're in. And unfortunately, we can't necessarily break from that. And I say this with the utmost respect, and it's going to be morbid as hell, but the boomers need to go. They do. The boomers need to go. Like, I feel once that happens, then things might start getting better in terms of our generations, and many of our generation are not going to church, or at least not in the same way. So, but I think until that happens, whatever you choose to do it outside the church. I think it'll be a lot more fulfilling and a lot more viable than doing anything with the church and you having to fight with people in terms of doing things in the light of being a Christian, and then they're not acting Christian-like. Case in point, as you saw at this church.
Well, as the atheist of the group, I'm gonna let everyone know
Jesus is the bread.
Jesus is the bread. So, yeah. Ready for our next one?
And Earl of Blood, just really quick, which boomers? I mean, I can make the argument all boomers in general, but I'm talking specifically of Black boomers. And I will make this very clear, not all boomers are like this. Like, shout out to Oz, like one of our comrades in the space. He's of that age, and he's definitely not this. And I know plenty of people who are within that generational gap who actually are on it and really, but it just seems the fair majority, at least the ones I know, are not necessarily radically minded, especially within the Black community, are not necessarily as radically minded as they used to be. So, so no, I don't want to speak for all of them, but I think just generally within my community, I've seen a complacency that I think has really undermined progress, that has really affected my generation and generations following them in terms of actually building upon what they brought in, like in their youth, and now that they're comfortable, they just kind of forgotten everything.
Yep.
Whatever you say, boomer.
All right. Well, I'm ready for our next one.